And he would put them in sensory deprivation chambers for weeks. They would have goggles over their eyes, earmuffs on their ears. They would have cardboard tubes over their arms so that they couldn't feel anything. And they would just be in a room for weeks on end. The idea, again, being to induce enough stress so that it breaks them down so that you can eventually build them up. But one of the saddest stories in the book, really, is of this woman named Mary Morrow, who was one of the patients of Ewen Cameron in Montreal. The sad thing about her especially is she had been a resident in training at the Allen Memorial Institute under Ewen Cameron. So she had been training to be a doctor under him, and she had administered some of these techniques, including electric shock. So that's one of the things, too. We would put these electrodes on the heads of people, and he would continually shock them until, again, the idea was to reduce them to, in one case, he says, an infantile-like state where they lose control of their bladder, they can't eat, they can't talk, they can't go to the bathroom on their own, they can't put on their own clothes or anything like that. So she was in charge of administering some of these, therapy sessions or whatever they would call it, but just basically torture to these people. She ended up having almost kind of a psychotic break herself. She became anorexic, and she failed her neurology exams, and so she went into a really deep depression. She attempted to commit suicide. That didn't work. She was admitted to the hospital, to another hospital. Ewen Cameron came to visit her, and he said, "I think you should come back to the Allen Memorial, not as a doctor, but as a patient, and let me treat you." So she ends up going back to the Allen Memorial as a patient, and she thought to herself that it's going to be okay. They're not going to do the electric shock to me because you had to sign a consent form and, for that to happen to you. The people who are signing the consent forms, they don't know how bad it's actually going to be. They're just signing their name. But she knows, I haven't signed a consent form, so they can't do that to me. But it turns out in the time since she went to the hospital and came back, they had stopped doing the consent forms, and he would just do this on whoever. And so they ended up doing this electric shock treatment on her. And, afterwards, she would be babbling, incontinent, couldn't put on her makeup or clothes or anything. Eventually, she would call her mother after some of these treatments, and her mother knew something was going on because she just became more and more incoherent as time went on. So the mother sent Mary's sister, Margaret, in order to go to the Allen Memorial to basically bust her out of there. So the sister walked in the front door and said, "I'm not leaving until I see Mary. I'm going to call the police if you don't let me through." So eventually she goes to her sister's room, opens the door, and Mary is sitting there just with wide bug eyes, doesn't even recognize her sister. It takes several days for her to figure out where she actually is, and then she gets busted out of there. So it's a very...
Was it reversible in any way?